On a frigid Wyoming morning, Bruno the German Shepherd lay motionless under falling snow, shunning his cozy shelter. Worried, his owner Thomas coaxed him inside, only to uncover the astonishing reason. A mother raccoon and her vulnerable newborns huddled where Bruno should have rested. In that moment, the bond between man and dog transformed into a testament of pure, selfless love. Bruno, with his gentle gaze and steadfast loyalty, chose compassion over comfort, risking his life to protect strangers in need. As the sun rose, Thomas realized kindness isn't spoken. It's embodied in silent, unforgettable sacrifices under a blanket of white. Thomas had awakened before dawn, the kind of pre-dawn silence that feels almost sacred in rural Wyoming. Steam curled from his coffee mug as he stood by the window, expecting to see Bruno, his loyal companion for years, nestled contentedly in the insulated doghouse just beyond the porch. Instead, his heart sank. There was Bruno curled tightly in the yard, snowflakes drifting onto his thick coat. He looked almost statue-like, save for the faint rise and fall of his sleek, powerful body. Thomas felt a prickle of unease. Bruno had always loved warmth. He would have chosen the comforts of home over a snowbank without hesitation. Gathering his courage, Thomas set down his mug and opened the door, calling Bruno gently by name. The dog lifted his head slowly, eyes bright and alert, but did not move toward the shelter. Instead, Bruno rose, tail wagging hesitantly, and followed Thomas to the door, stopping only when he reached the threshold. There he stood, paws pressed to the wood, letting out a low whine that sounded almost like a plea. Thomas could not ignore it. He stepped back, closed the door, and grabbed his boots, determined to uncover the mystery of Bruno's silent vigil. Under the weak glow of the rising sun, Thomas approached the doghouse with a mix of dread and resolve. Every crunch of snow underfoot seemed to echo in the hush of morning. Bruno walked at his side, hackles relaxed but gaze fixed unwaveringly on the shelter. When Thomas knelt beside the entrance, the sight froze his blood. Inside lay a mother raccoon, her matted fur heavy with snow, her body curled protectively around 6 tiny kits. Their delicate forms were no larger than soft cotton balls, mouths pressed against their mother's belly in a desperate search for warmth. The mother, though weak, met Thomas's gaze with wide, trusting eyes. Bruno stood silent sentinel, head bowed respectfully before the fragile family. Thomas realized in that instant that Bruno had done more than give up his own comfort. He had stood guard through the night, shielding the raccoon family from the biting wind and hungry eyes of other predators. Emotion welled in Thomas's chest. Pride, humility, and a profound sense of wonder mingled in his throat. He reached out, hand trembling, and gently stroked Bruno's side, whispering thanks for showing him what true compassion looked like. Thomas knew he had to act swiftly to save the raccoon mother and her kits before hypothermia claimed them. He hurried back to the house and gathered hay, old blankets, and scrap wood, fashioning a second shelter near the edge of the tree line. Every plank he lifted, every nail he hammered, his thoughts were of Bruno's quiet sacrifice. When the new refuge was ready, he approached Bruno and murmured instructions as if the dog understood every word. Bruno's eyes shone with a gentle intelligence as he watched Thomas lead the raccoons into their new haven. He never barked, never lunged. Instead, he maintained a calm vigil at a respectful distance, tail brushing softly against the snow. The mother raccoon hesitated only briefly before stepping inside, followed by her kits, whose feeble squeaks seemed to echo Bruno's own soft whine. Thomas closed the door quietly and stood back, tears stinging his eyes at the sight of Bruno sitting patiently in the snow, his head held high as if accepting quiet praise for a job well done. In the days that followed, Thomas observed a new routine forming beneath the pale winter sky. Each morning, Bruno would patrol the area around the second shelter, sniffing gently at its entrance before turning to Thomas with an expression that said, "They're safe." Thomas would call Bruno inside for breakfast and warm blankets, but the dog's thoughts always drifted back to the rescued family. Even when Thomas built a third shelter deeper among the pines, Bruno would find his way there, positioning himself as guard and guardian. Occasionally, curious deer would wander nearby, or a fox might prowl just beyond sight, but Bruno never wavered. He stood firm, silent, watchful, compassionate. Thomas marveled at how Bruno's instincts had guided him to protect beings so different from himself, how the dog had felt the raccoon family's fear and vulnerability as if it were his own. Observing Bruno's steadfast dedication, Thomas began to question his own measures of courage and comfort. He had built strong walls around himself, walls of routine, expectation and pride. But Bruno's example showed him that true strength lies in opening one's heart to the needs of others. News of Bruno's act spread among neighbors, drawing a small crowd on one particularly crisp afternoon. Thomas led them to the site, where Bruno sat alert beside the shelter, snow swirling around his paws. The mother raccoon peeked out, nose twitching, and the kits scuttled around her in playful discovery of their new home. There was applause, and Thomas felt a swell of emotion as people petted Bruno and offered gentle congratulations. Yet Bruno simply leaned into each touch, eyes soft, as though reminding everyone that the spotlight belonged not to him, but to the fragility of life he had saved. One neighbor, a wiry rancher named Joe, whispered to Thomas, "That's more than a dog, he's an angel in fur." Thomas nodded, tears warming his cheeks, and hugged Bruno around the neck. In that embrace, Thomas felt a surge of gratitude that transcended words. Bruno had bridged the gap between human and wild, teaching everyone who witnessed his vigil that kindness knows no bounds and that acts of mercy can resonate far beyond their quiet beginnings. Winter waned and grasses pushed through the melting snow, but Bruno's devotion never faltered. He continued his daily checks, greeting the now robust raccoon family with calm respect. Thomas often caught himself smiling at the simple scene. Raccoon kits tumbling outside the shelter as Bruno sat perched like a gentle sentinel, his coat glistening in the afternoon sun. When spring fully arrived, the mother raccoon led her offspring into the trees, where the young learned to scurry among the branches. Bruno watched until they were out of sight, then returned to Thomas's side, offering a contented sigh. It was as if Bruno understood that his work was done, that the family he had protected was ready to thrive on its own. Thomas knelt beside Bruno and whispered, "You did it, boy. You did something no one asked you to do." Bruno nuzzled Thomas's hand, eyes glinting with pure love and satisfaction. Looking back on that winter, Thomas realized that Bruno had given him more than a story of rescue. He had offered a mirror in which to see his own capacity for empathy. Bruno's silent act of sacrifice reminded Thomas that the heart's greatest warmth comes not from stoking a fire, but from extending kindness to those shivering on the fringes. In the quiet aftermath of snow and shadows, Bruno taught a lesson that transcends language. Compassion is a choice, and sometimes the strongest among us are those who choose to stand in the cold so others might find shelter. As the wind whispered through the tall pines and the last snowbanks melted into memory, Thomas knew he would carry Bruno's story and its lesson wherever life's seasons might take him.